Somebody has to tell the story from the colonial side. So by and large, they all do. It's the side with the power, the money. It's where most of us live. I am in the US. My family and friends are all here or in Europe. And people naturally tell the story from their lived perspective. What's changed? Nobody outside that frame needs to listen. We will tell a story for our own education, our own edification, and our desire or lack of to change. We will mostly mythologize ourselves, we do this all the time, into the role of neutral, wise, and savior. We will affect an aura of transcendent disinterest, strike the most ridiculous, pompous poses, hopefully be recorded doing these poses, and see the recordings later, and at last, the most heretofore loyal of fantasists should laugh. For instance, since CNN, the whole world that speaks English can drop in on America and wonder what all this talk of first means. The Europeans will listen and understand. They will know they are second, but just might be first, again, if China doesn't get there first. So the Euro ear will be keen. Their flags will be laundered, ready, pressed, fresh out of storage where they have collected dust for 100-odd years. Alistair and Rory will look and sound important, as relevant as Kipling and as out of date. Blinken's shiny suit will make Africans asking for water put on Ray-Bans. Los Angeles will become Gaza too, both destroyed by hands of God, they will seem to say. But if we can find a culprit, things just might change. It's a very good day for storytellers, but their yarns, their litanies are worn very thin. Culprit and victim are changing places, like the first being last. On January 15th, ceasefire announcement day, the news asked every single channel, what have the last 15 months been like for Israel? Kid you not, over and over again. And at last I thought, well, that is their story too. I hadn't really thought about that. I didn't give a lot of time. I didn't think about how hard it was to run a gulag. So we can choose which story to hear and share. There will be two at the minimum. That is good for storytellers in our tradition. The good guys, us, are in the white hats. The rest are black, in black hats. Slip. Both sides will do this, have this done, have done this. It is our kind of story, the only one we ride with, good versus evil. Coda. I didn't know Kazuo Ishiguro was born in Nagasaki in 1954, moved to England in 1960. I had wondered. He wrote Remains of the Day, among other marvelous, delicate writer, made into a fabulous film. My thought has been, what difference would his history and culture have made telling a story about the British aristocracy from a foreign land? But he was 6, so probably basically British by the time he was writing books. James Clavell, who wrote Shogun, was Australian, raised British and naturalized American, born in 1921, writing about Asia, Japan, in 1600. He was a captain in the British Army. I loved the books in my 20s. He was a fan of Ayn Rand, so dinner would have been short, but maybe not. Maybe he and I would be rare sitters on opposite sides, but enjoyers of much else in common. It does happen. To me, perhaps more than most, apparently. Climbing out of bed in the morning to go to vote, she says, for who? Oh, you're kidding? Well, yes, last night you persuaded me of many things, but not of that. See you tonight. I remembered his books so vividly because it was him, Blackthorne. He studied the history, a fascinating encounter between, to some of the worst of European and Japanese culture, or to some of the best. Clavell seems an uncomplicated Westerner who was deeply empathetic to Japanese culture. Well, why? He was a POW for God's sake, the perfect introduction for a sympathetic interpreter. Did it have what his culture lacked? I wondered. Were its extremes seductive to him? I actually think that the essential mores or mores or whatever you call it of the British aristocratic culture, the American elitist culture, and the Japanese culture of the same status are very, very similar, just different ways of exercising it. Euripides wrote the Persians about the enemy of his Greece sympathetically. Ah, storytellers. Clavell joined the Royal Artillery in 1940 at 19, was sent to Singapore after Pearl Harbor was attacked. His ship was sunk. He was shot in the face, captured by the Japanese army on Java in 1942 and sent to a Changi prison camp in Singapore. Quote, Changi, apologies for bad pronunciation, became my university instead of my prison. Among the inmates, there were experts in all walks of life, the high and the low roads. I studied and absorbed everything I could, from physics to counterfeiting, but most of all, I learned the art of surviving, the most important course of all. End quote. Fascinating. A university instead of prison, by choice. This is our storyteller, our guide to a time none of us knew. He is a foreigner to the subject, and so perhaps the only essential, most useful interpreter of that subject for our foreign imagination. This is who our storytellers are and have always been for the New York Times, The Guardian, or God Save Us Hollywood. Whatever they protest about their objective honesty, all that matters is how we receive it. We're being told a story. We believe, we make truth of what we choose or need. Fiction, well, be serious. Fiction is a criticism, well, be serious. Without Omar Sharif, Anthony Quinn, and Alec Guinness, most of us non-Arab, non-historians would know absolutely nothing about the Bedouin, or more aptly, would feel not a thing about them. So I leave you to judge, not which is more true, but what is more real. There are some Clavells covering West Asia, the Middle East right now, and they stand, it seems, on the edge of something. It's apocalyptic. Some of them, Pilger's gone, unfortunately, but some of them stand there and you can see them looking into the camera like this is not what it should have been. This is not what they've been brought up to. This is destroying all of their various indoctrinations. Some of them are better at this than others, that's for sure. But it's really interesting to see the foreigners to the cultures. The non-Arab, the non-Jew look on this and you see them making up their minds. The Americans, by and large, are hopeless because they're so ingrained. They really do wonder what happened in Israel for the last 15 months. That's their preoccupation, which in a sense is interesting also.